is Hannah, and I'll be making a quick video about Morgan, which is an HTTP request logger middleware for node.js. Okay, so what is Morgan? Morgan, as I said earlier, is just an HTTP request logger middleware for Node.js, which helps provide logs of HTTP request information, common properties, headers, body, as well as HTTP response information. So anything kind of related to our HTTP requests and responses that we handle will be shown with Morgan. And so HTTP logging can assist with logging all requests and responses, or maybe some that meet specific or certain criteria. It also helps with selecting specific parts of requests and responses. And lastly, it helps with redacting sensitive information from logs. And so why should we log in the first place? Well, HTTP logging depends on your goal. So whether or not you're debugging, maybe you're wanting to detect or investigate intrusions, kind of having a more security focus, especially in web apps since API is the very first point of entry for all users. So it all just kind of depends on what type of information you need or wish to keep track of. And it's really useful too since we could keep track of maybe specific parts of the requests and responses, as well as kind of see what's going on in our web app. Okay, so I'll be going over the syntax for Morgan. So here we use app.use, Morgan, format, and then options. And so in my live coding later, I'll just mainly be highlighting the format, but I'll also talk a little bit about the options here. So here, format could be a predefined name, so a lot of different keywords that could exist under the NPM Morgan documentation. It could be a string of a format string, or a function to produce a specific log entry. So as I said earlier, the predefined name is kind of given to us through the documentation. And for example, we have dev, which is more concise output colored by response status for development use, short, which has a shorter than default response with response time, and lastly tiny, which is minimal output. If we go over here, we could see the specific tokens that they show. So for example, here in dev, we keep track of method, URL, status, and other relevant information like that. And here we could kind of see what's going on with short and tiny. Secondly, we have string of a format string. And so here, it's kind of if you want to customize your specific log entries or just your specific tokens that you want to use. So for example, here we could say we want to keep track of the method, URL, status, response content length, and response time. And lastly, we have the custom format function. So here, tokens refers to an object with all defined tokens. Request is the HTTP request, and response is the response. The format function returns the log line as a string, or undefined or null to skip logging. And this skip logging is actually part of the options, which I'll go over in a little bit. But yeah, here we could kind of see how this is kind of a different way to keep track of the specific tokens we want. Really similar to over here, the format string. You want method, URL, status. Here we're also keeping track of method, URL, status. And you could also customize this as much as you want. Okay, and here's the options. So the options take specific properties of logging into account through the options object. So here's the skip that I was mentioning earlier. It's just a function to determine if logging is skipped. We also have immediate and stream. So up to you whether or not you want to use these options, since you could also use Morgan with just the format. Okay, and here are some helpful links and resources. So we have the documentation in the GitHub repo. So here's the documentation where I got a lot of the relevant information from my slides, as well as kind of referencing the specific options and keywords we could be using. And over here in the GitHub repo, you could see what's going on, very similar to the documentation, as well as the code. And here are the quick references I used. And now we'll go on to the live coding portion. Okay, so for the live coding part, I'll just show how we could use Morgan to log everything and see our responses and requests. So here I have my group project that I worked on for my web development class. So we could write here. Okay, and now that's up and running. And I'll give a quick rundown of what this is. So pretty much we made a food delivery website where you could kind of process the orders you're making, as well as log in, and when you're a user, you could browse different restaurants. Like here, we could look over here, look at the menu, add items to our cart, look at the reviews for restaurants as well as leave reviews, things like that. So pretty basic things, very similar to things like Grubhub and DoorDash. Okay, so I'll go to the coding portion first. So if we go back to our Visual Studio Code, we'll just have to add in our middleware. So we could do that here. So I could just make it kind of go with our other middleware that I'm using. So here we'll just do const Morgan equals require Morgan. Oh yeah, make sure that you have Morgan installed, by the way. You could just do that using npm iMorgan. And here, since I already downloaded it, I'm already up to date. But yeah. And so let's rerun the server. And so here, we are adding Morgan. And then to use it, like I said earlier, I could bring our slideshow over here. We'll just have to use our specific format and then the options that we want. So for this video, I'll just be going over the 3 quick examples that I showed from the documentation. So first, let's try using one of the predefined keywords or names. So if we go over here, you can pull up the documentation. And if we go scroll down here, you can see the different types of predefined formats you can use. And so let's say we want to use, I don't know, let's just use dev for now. So here, let's go add it in. I have .use Morgan, dev, and then, here we go. Okay, and save that. Oh, and then we gotta make sure we use quotations actually here. Oh. Okay. Okay, so now that we have everything set up and ready, we can now see how Morgan keeps track of our requests and responses and the types of console logs that they'll give us. So for the web app that I've developed with my group, there's a lot of different things that we kept track of. So for example, if I go back over here, we could see like restaurants. We had to retrieve each specific restaurant in our database, as well as logging in. Maybe if I want to turn in like my own account, we'll have to get stuff from the user there. Or even just like sorting our reviews a certain way, like ascending or descending, or viewing the menu and adding things to our cart. But here it just shows we must log in to add items. Just little things like that. We could actually go back now. Okay, so we could put it side by side here. And so if we scroll down to dev, we could see that it'll show the method, the URL, status, response time in milliseconds, as well as the response content length. So here, you could kind of see how each of these kind of align with everything in the dev. So we have get, we have the specific URL that we're accessing. And so here, like we could see for specific images that we're using in each page, as well as the response time here. Okay, and for another example, we could actually go to the admin portal. So let's go over here and log out. Okay, and so we're logged in here for admin. Maybe you want to add a restaurant, so that'll involve using post. So let's just type in some random stuff, test 123, test address. Just save for now. Okay, and we go here, we could see like it's been added. And if we go back here, we actually could see different methods now. Like here we have a post since we're adding a new restaurant to our database. And yeah. Okay, so I actually did test it with combined and common, and it does work. I just didn't want to show the output since it does show my remote address, which contains my IP address. But if we use combined or common, it'll include much more information here. You could test that out for yourself. But we could try Tiny to see how that compares to dev. So here we go, and let's run the server. Okay, I'll just open it up here so it's convenient. Okay, go over here real quick. So let's just look at Burger Shack and kind of look at the menu, reviews, sort the reviews. Okay, and let's go back. And here we could see that this is actually a much more condensed version of what we looked earlier with dev. So we have just the method, the URL, status, 304 here, and any response content length as well as the response time. But yeah. Now we could try our second method, which is right over here. And that is just using a string of a format string. And so here we could actually kind of take what's going on in here and put that in Morgan. Oopsies, here we go. Let me put the quotation, make sure it's closed. Save that. And then let's try again, and good, actually, let's put it side by side so you can see what's going on. Let's go home. And once we go home, actually, we already get a lot of things loaded in. And it's actually pretty similar to the different keywords that we've used before. So let's try using a different token this time. And on the documentation, it actually shows all the different tokens that you could use. Okay, so here, after looking at the documentation, I just picked some random tokens that we could test. And these are specific tokens that we haven't really used or seen yet in the past keywords. So I just put like the date, HTTP version, remote user, and user agent. And so we could kind of see what that gives us. Okay, here we go. And let's refresh the home page. And then you can see a lot of the information matches up here. So let me kind of highlight it so it's easier to see. We have the date as well as the HTTP version. We could see my remote user, which is just my laptop and relevant information, as well as the user agent. Okay, lastly, we could look at the custom format function. And so let's try testing it out and see what we get. I'll just copy paste that for simplicity. Close this. Just copy paste that. Or let's just put it in here. Okay. And so here we could kind of see that we're using specific tokens again. We're just using the method, URL, status, response, and response time. So pretty simple pretty similar to the past keywords that we've been using. So here, since I've saved and we're using node.js, it'll go automatically. So let's refresh our homepage. I don't know what happened to the nav bar. We see that it all matches up again with what we're looking for. So if we go over here, we got the method, the URL, the status, the response if there's any, and the response time. And so for fun, let's go add in another token. And maybe you want to look at the HTTP version. So let's go add that in real quick here. And since it's two words, we'll just have to use a similar version to response time here. We could do this, and then we could do HTTP version. Okay, there we go. Now let's go refresh that. And here we could actually see the specific version, which is pretty cool. But yeah, and so that's just a quick little tutorial on how I could use Morgan to keep track of what's going on in a request and responses for a web app.